Welcome, everyone, to the fourth episode of TezTalks Radio, where we dive deeper into the stories and motivations of the builders and contributors to the Tezos ecosystem. I'm your host, William McKenzie, and today we're joined with a very special guest, Johann Eid of Chainlink, and also our co-host, Brian Lee. How are you guys doing today?
Yeah, doing great. It's a wonderful day in the afterword of a new word, let's say. Doing great.
Yeah, I'm doing great as well. So one thing that I really like to talk about when I talk to people in crypto is how they got into crypto. So can you take a moment and talk about your background? What were you doing before crypto? And perhaps how you got into it, and then how you ended up at Chainlink.
Sure. This makes sense. So, I think I have quite a typical kind of way into crypto. Like, I was always passionate by, computer science. I have a computer science degree. I did cybersecurity. I was still, like, when I got into crypto, I was already a software engineer at a company, right? I was doing some C# software. Now, I had heard of Bitcoin quite early in the days. Like, I think, like I've heard this many times.
Yeah.
So many people heard of Bitcoin. 99% didn't get into it at this point. Same for me. I think to get in Bitcoin at the time, you needed to have a very strong understanding of how our economy works and how the system is structured, which I didn't have at the time. So this all changed when I kind of started diving a bit more into, and it was really nothing to crypto how this happened, right? But I started diving more into how the economy works, how the Federal Reserve in the US works also. And understanding this was really key for me to understand, the importance of a strong money, of a strong kind of currency. Because the backbone, like currency is like energy, right? Like people work for currency, it's energy. It's something you transfer between people. And the more value you create, the more energy you get in some way, right? Like it's like this perfect kind of schema. However, the whole thing is flawed and the whole thing doesn't work if the energy and the currency is kind of counterfeited and can be printed out of nowhere, right? Like that's a huge kind of refrain and a huge, I think, it's a big obstacle to human development and I think innovation and like a fair society. So I got into Bitcoin in 2016 or something along these lines. And then, of course, because I had a strong computer science background, I got into Ethereum, when it came out or a bit later.
Yeah.
Then I've been hooked since then, right? Because the more the years passed and the more we've seen, innovation, the more we've seen how important cryptocurrencies and the blockchain world were. And I do really believe that in the same way that the internet disrupted newspaper, I think that crypto and the blockchain will disrupt the banking system and the financial system. And I think the financial system is a much bigger beast than newspaper. So I think it will be quite something to live for. Yeah.
Cool. I think I also saw on Twitter you were previously working with OneChain as well. Is that right?
Yeah. So I was at OneChain. That was my first step into working in crypto. So I first got interested, of course. Then I started working in it. Like I left my job to work at OneChain. I was always very passionate about interoperability, right? Because if you look at how economics work and how financials work, like you always benefit by building bridges, right?
Yeah.
And currently I'm at Chainlink, which is building bridges with the real world. Before I was at OneChain, which was building bridges between blockchains, right? And you do really always see value creation whenever more bridges are created, because it means that this energy, this currency can circulate freely between new environments, right? So in the same way that free commerce and, being able to do business across the world, in an international manner, does bring a lot of value to people, because you can always get the best product at the lowest, cheapest rate. That's what you get with interoperability. Like you can always get more value and more efficiency
Right.
So yeah, that's basically something which has always really passionated me. So I was at OneChain for a year and a half. I was working really on the strategy there, on the product, where should we expand, etc. And then I got Chainlink to Chainlink around a year ago, always in the space of interoperability. I met the team, and the team struck me as some very brilliant people. I had been following the project since its inception, but when I met the team in person, it was really the thing to bring me forward to joining them. Yeah.
Right. Cool. Thanks for that intro. So now I want to jump into like maybe a quick pitch about Chainlink, because some of the people who are on this podcast, who are listening to this podcast, they might not know exactly what it is. So can you give us like a quick pitch?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the best way to define Chainlink is an infrastructure layer. In the same way that people need a smart contract, like a blockchain, in order to deploy smart contracts and infrastructure there, they also need an infrastructure to bridge their application to the real world. So Chainlink is basically a framework and an ecosystem which allows you to access what we call node operators. You can consider node operators to be very similar to what we call miners, or what you guys call bakers on Tezos. It's basically people securing a network, right? Here, there are multiple networks being secured. Each data point is a new network, and they're being secured by multiple node operators, which are a subset of the whole ecosystem. So basically, what you can do with Chainlink is you can have 7 node operators report the data for a given price, let's say the price of Ether. And that will be a subset of the whole Chainlink network, right? Because you have like a few hundred node operators right now. You'll have maybe 10,000, 100,000 in a few years. You get a subset. And as the data secures more and more value, so let's say you're securing $500 of value with your price of ETH. It's not it's not a huge amount. So you can have 7 node operators. And as you scale more and more, you will add more and more node operators. So the subset of operators will grow, right? Basically, what we provide is a framework which allows you to have the right token incentives, like the right economic incentives to pay node operators, to incentivize them to provide you data, the right software to provide you this data, because it's extremely important to have something that's tested, that's reliable, that's built by a extremely experienced team there. And we provide, just like Tezos, Ethereum provide a framework to deploy smart contracts, we provide a framework to deploy data points on-chain easily without having to rebuild the wheel every time. So I cannot conceive an ecosystem growing if there is no Oracle solution, and if there is no framework for people to easily access their data points, right? Like it's really a huge make it or don't make it, because if you don't have something which can provide you data easily, and you have to spin up your own oracles every time, that's a huge work and time suck, and also a huge security threat, right? Because people doing it might not have the right experience to do this. And what happens if, instead of getting the price of Ether USD, which is $200 or something, you get the price which is $1,000? What happens to your application? Very often it doesn't survive the next day, right? So that's really what we do at Chainlink. We provide the right framework and the right ecosystem for people to connect to the real world through node operators. Yeah.
Thanks for giving that introduction, Johann. Let's go ahead and move into the work being done by Chainlink with Tezos. Johann, can you tell the audience about the work that Chainlink is doing with Tezos, and why should people be excited about it?
Yeah, sure. So just for some background there also, I've been following Tezos for a very long time. I do think it's a really important project to the ecosystem, right? I think there are many, like blockchains are always made with trade-offs, right? And you need to see what are the right trade-offs to what you want to build. Tezos does encompass some really key characteristics, in my opinion, which are extremely exciting, of on-chain governance, of being able to do snarks, right? Like I see a lot of research going there. They have also implemented proof of stake, I think, like like a liquid proof of stake maybe 1 or 2 years ago already. So it's been a while ago. So I do think it's a project that's constantly innovating. I'm based in Paris, so I have the chance to be able to know the people at Nomadics from time to time, like see them, etc. And I do think there are a lot of extremely smart people behind the project. So that's already one reason to be excited about Tezos, but I'll tell you more reasons to be excited about what we're doing with Tezos with Chainlink. So currently, what you've seen with Ethereum, because we've been on Ethereum for on mainnet for more than a year now. We've seen a huge kind of rise in DeFi projects, in financial applications, right? And the common ground of every financial applications, except automated market makers, but that's something else, they usually need oracles and extremely strong, reliable oracles. So let's say you want to create a derivative. Let's say you want to create a synthetic asset. DAI maker is a synthetic asset, right? Like you're putting some collateral and you're minting some DAI. This DAI is indexed to the price of the dollar, to the value of the dollar. Synthetics, of course, is minting synthetic assets which are following the price of let's say gold, of silver, of oil. So basically people put up a collateral and they mint an asset which does track the price of a real world asset. Now, derivatives and synthetic world is worth, I think, probably a few $1 trillion in the real world, in the financial system. The money markets, like lending, borrowing, need oracles in order to know when a collateral needs to be liquidated. Like whenever you're going to borrow some money, you're going to put up a collateral, right? And if this collateral drops below a certain margin threshold, you get liquidated. Where does this price come from for the liquidation, right? Like there are so many use cases which makes it so that without strong oracles, you cannot have a DeFi ecosystem. If you look at every application, they all need oracles, right? Now, how do you get these oracles? And can you really delegate oracles, which are such a key part of an ecosystem, to the developers, throwing up something together, etc.? No, it doesn't work. They need something like Chainlink, just like they needed something like Ethereum and Tezos to build smart contracts, right? Like they cannot just hack something around. So Chainlink, what you're trying to replicate is the same growth we saw in Ethereum. I really strongly believe that the fundamentals are there to have it on Tezos, right? And I do think that many applications on Tezos will need oracles. And they have two ways, right? Without Chainlink, they would have the way where they just hack something around or they just don't build. So now, if they hack something around, something bad will happen. That one I'm guaranteed. I can guarantee you, because building a DeFi application and building an Oracle solution, I know that the blockchain space does move very fast, but I'm pretty sure that it would take many years to get something spun up. And would it be secure? Would it work? I don't think so. Now, using Chainlink, they can leverage years of experience. We've been working for 3 years on oracles. We have people like Ari Jules on our team, which is an ex-chief scientist that who's working with us, advising us, etc. Who's the ex-chief scientist at RSA. We're very strong people working with us, right? Very smart people in the team, and we can leverage all we've learned to put it on Tezos, and we can allow developers to build applications using our proven oracles, which today are securing, I think, around $250 million of value on Ethereum across 27, 28, and much more DeFi applications. So, that's basically what I think will happen. I think we'll have tremendous growth on Tezos. To sustain this growth, Tezos applications will need strong oracles. And I do think that the fact that Chainlink is there will actually make even more applications build on there. Because then the applications, like a lot of applications, will always be facing, do I build there? How do I build there, right? Like, what do I need? I need a smart contract. Okay, I have Tezos, I have SmartPy, I can code up something, that's easy. I need real-world data. And without Chainlink, what do you say when you need real-world data? Okay, I can take 2 years to build a reliable oracle, or I can just do something else, and I can guarantee you that a lot of people will do something else. And if they build oracles, it's not great. So they'll be able to say now, okay, I can use Chainlink. Yeah, case closed. I can go to the next step, So I do think that we have many, many applications which actually are incentivized to build on Tezos because Chainlink is there, because oracles are there, because we've proven our reliability. Creating an application, financial application, isn't something fun, right? It's extremely hard work, and you're also securing a few $100 million of value, right? We're not at a time where it's completely decentralized and no one has any liability for what's happening, right? If people lose money, it will be on the founder. Not everyone wants to risk some oracles going badly and losing money for users, because then their life is ruined. So I can guarantee you that's also something else. You can rely on provably secure and a solution which has been proven many and many times to secure your data. And I think that's extremely important to a growth. So that's what excites me, and that's what I think should excite everyone who's committed in seeing Tezos grow.
Thanks. I think that was a really good move into the next question that we have, or the next topic, which is about price feeds. Before, you were talking about apps where if you had a contract, I guess, that is like, hey, if it gets to this price, please sell all of my goods, right? And if you were trying to grab price of the token or the good from one source, that source would be able to change it, right? They could change it and they could potentially mess you up. With Chainlink, something like that is not possible because you get the price from a bunch of different sources. I want to talk about this website here, feeds.chain.link. And these are a bunch of price feeds that are decentralized. And you can use these to build apps around in order to get the real price of something. I just wanted to talk about the differences first in between some of these pairs. Like, for example, on the Bitcoin pair, I see the price is given by 21 nodes, I believe. But I was looking at a different pair, like I think I was looking at the Pound one, and that one is 9 nodes. So can you talk about why that is? Like why one is 9 nodes and the other is 21?
Definitely. So that's really linked to the principle of scalable security I was explaining a bit earlier, which is basically with Chainlink, you can always grow the subset of nodes you have securing your reference contract, your network, your price network, based on the value it's securing, right? So BTC USD is currently 21 nodes because it's securing more value than the Pound one is securing, right? So we scale the number of nodes by the value which is being secured, basically, right? And I think that's an extremely key concept to understanding how you can basically scale your security very easily as a DApp or as a financial application, right? Yeah. Let's say currently I'm securing $100 million value. I will have 9 nodes on some of the networks I use because 9 nodes is also already extremely secure, and maybe I reach 500 million. I'll take 15 nodes. Maybe I reach 1 billion. I'll take 21 nodes, etc., etc. So that's really the principle of scalable security. Now, you address some points which I think are extremely key, which I didn't go into yet, which were different data sources, right? Now, there are two layers of decentralization in these fields. The first layer is we have multiple node operators. So you can check each of the small dots. You go, like when you type a network, when you go to ETHUSD, you have multiple dots. In the case of ETH, in the case of BTC, 21 dots, right? Now, if you look at these dots, they're basically node operators. The node operators which are securing these networks are very often, actually, funnily enough, a lot of them are bakers on Tezos. They're people who have proven their worth by being a blockchain infrastructure company, which is securing a few $100 million of value, right, across Tezos, Cosmos, across many different blockchains. So these people are the node operators. They're spread around the globe, and they have PagerDuty services, which tells them whenever their node is down or whenever something is happening which shouldn't be happening, right? So they're extremely alert, and they're distributed, right? So extremely professional, distributed all over the world. So this allows you to make sure that if you have 21 nodes and they're not all in the same location, the systemic risk of, let's say, a complete power shutdown in Germany, if we had 21 nodes in Germany, that's go down tremendously, right? Like it can happen it can't affect us. And the other layer of decentralization is where do these people get this data, right? Because these people are only running an Ethereum and a Chainlink node. They're not data providers. They do not provide data. They're not data curators. Data curation is something which is extremely complex and extremely hard to get right. So we don't pretend to want to do data curation ourselves or have node operators do data curation. It would be extremely dangerous in the way I see it. So we basically leverage what we call, I mean, everyone knows them in crypto, data aggregators. So data aggregators, the most famous one is CoinMarketCap, I assume. You have people like OnGecko. We do have around 7 to 10 data aggregators being used constantly on each network in order to make sure that we don't rely on only one data aggregator, right? So here you get decentralization in the bridges. The bridges are basically the node operators, the people who are connecting the blockchain to the real world, and you get decentralization at the data source. They're getting data from multiple data providers. So that's the 2 layers of decentralization you need to have, right? And basically, once you get this right, and once you make sure that the data aggregators are the most professional and you have as many as possible, and you have node operators which are also extremely professional and which are distributed and decentralized, then you get to something extremely reliable, which can secure multiple $1 million of value, multiple billions, maybe trillions one day. So that's the goal.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And that was actually going to be one of my questions because, like, we see a bunch of nodes here, but, I was going to ask, what if they all grab the price from the same place, right? So I'm glad to hear that you guys also grab the data from a bunch of different sources because that makes it a lot more decentralized. And can you talk about a bit of the process of how, like, if I wanted to make a feed for Bitcoin or something, how would I be included onto this list?
Yeah, for sure. So feeds at its core is basically a smart contract, right? It's completely permissionless. So you can create your own smart contract. You can create your own price feed for BTC or maybe for a token, which we haven't listed on the feeds.chain.link, right? The only thing with the only difference with the feeds you're seeing on this website is that those feeds are basically considered by us to be critical infrastructure. It's something that that we, as Chainlink, want to make sure that people can leverage, that projects can leverage. So we deploy, just like anyone can deploy these feeds. We deploy them, and we made sure that we were selecting extremely reliable node operators, extremely reliable data providers. Anyone can create the same networks that we created. It just like we did it because we feel like we have this duty of giving back to this ecosystem which has given us so much. So we wanted to create some critical infrastructure, just like we would do on Tezos. Anyone can do it, but again, it's the beginning, so we prefer to show the way, and later on, probably experts and professionals will be able to create their own kind of curated price feeds, and people will be using them, right? Like we're just showing the potential here, and I think it will, really be even more kind of widespread to create their own price feeds in the future. That's really the goal. Yeah. Cool.
I'm glad to hear that. The next thing that we want to talk about is just maybe a clarification of the term Oracle. So back in April 2020, Coinbase made an announcement. They made a signed price feed. So can you just talk a little about the differences between a centralized price feed versus Chainlink? It's something that we talked about in the past, but I think actually in this case, the Coinbase feed could actually be one of the sources you use for this. Yeah.
First, I do think Coinbase is doing tremendous work in kind of growing the ecosystem as a whole. These people, if you want people who have something at stake in the growth of crypto, you need to look at exchanges, in some way also. They do have a huge kind of incentive to grow this ecosystem, right? So what they did was really a step towards helping the ecosystem grow. Now, it was coined as being an oracle. I'm not sure it's, like we don't, and no one owns the copyright to what an oracle is, right?
Yeah.
But I would say it's not really the definition I was giving, because whenever, to me, an oracle is basically something which can put data on chain, right? And what Coinbase created was an API endpoint, which allows anyone to check that the signature, like the provenance of the data is from Coinbase, right? Like anyone can check on chain. However, you still need someone to deliver this data. You still need an oracle, a node operator, right? So as you just said, actually very rightfully so, Coinbase and Chainlink, like the Coinbase and the API endpoint, like the Coinbase Oracle as it's been coined, could very easily and should be part at some point of the Chainlink ecosystem, right? Of some data source that Chainlink nodes can take data from and put it on chain, right? So I do think it's an extremely nice piece, complementary piece to what we've been building. I of course, like when you read 5 to 10 minutes, you will avoid of the drama of saying that's the competition, etc. Like, because it's completely different than what you're building. It's completely complementary. It's an extremely reliable professional team which has really good volume on their exchange. We can provide actually high quality data. Now, I do think we would prefer this data, of course, we prefer to use aggregators, as I said, right? Because they can curate the data. I do still think that the signature aspect is actually very nice, because it adds even more confidence in node operators. Node operators cannot play with the data, basically. They cannot interject. And that's already the case being enforced by, extremely high incentive systems, etc. But, like you can never have enough security. So if you have a signature to check where the data is coming from and that it wasn't tampered with, I think it's extremely nice, right? Just to end here, I wouldn't coin it an oracle. I think it's extremely complementary to what you're building, because you need data sources. I think that's basically it there.
Thanks for clearing that up. There was definitely a lot of confusion around that terminology in Coinbase's announcement. But let's go ahead and move on to our next topic, which is tokenized assets. For anyone who's been involved within Tezos, there have been lots of announcements regarding STOs, specifically in the real estate sector. How can tokenized assets benefit from having off-chain data?
Yeah, definitely. So tokenized assets and STOs, right, are extremely linked to the real world. Like the way to see it is that in order to participate in STOs, like you need to be KYC'd, you need to have, there are regulations around it, right? Regulations are not native to the blockchain world. They're actually pretty foreign to the blockchain world, right? So you will always need oracles to do the bridge between the real world assets and the blockchain. Now, I have a few examples actually to give. They don't concern STOs directly, but they're still in the same field, which is how do we get real world assets onto the blockchain. So a project called DeFi Money Markets on Ethereum recently built a marketplace, and it's like a money market basically. And the collateral being used are car loans, right? And these car loans, the proof of those loans are being put on chain from the real world to the blockchain using Chainlink node operators, Chainlink oracles, right? So like intrinsically, an asset which is connected to the real world will always need data, and like we'll always need a connector to put it to get its data on chain, right? And it will need the right connector. It will need to have very strong security guarantees because like if you're putting real world assets on chain, you need to make sure that the information is being transferred in a secure, reliable, transparent manner, right? Like you want to build something which is end-to-end secure. And basically, Chainlink oracles can provide you that, right? Like they can provide you end-to-end security, which is so key to building something that people will actually adopt, that people will actually use, right? STOs. I mean, for STOs, you'll always need to how do we say? Well, you can always get yield. You can always get multiple kind of different financial instruments are at play here, right? And a lot of these instruments will be baked into the real world. So you will always need strong connectors to get this data on chain. It's I think both are extremely important to get right, like the tokenization part and how do you get this tokenization right? It's with oracles, basically.
Right. Thanks for explaining that a little bit. You spoke about this previously, just detailing some possible use cases earlier on, but what other use cases do you see as being viable on Tezos with the help of off-chain data?
I do know from what I've seen that Tezos does have a lot of I would say ambitions, or at least does have a passion towards getting into the IoT sector from what I've seen, right? Right. I think we're getting more and more into a world of, I think like it's not really something that anyone can contest. Like we're getting into this automation world, right? Where you're going to have objects and things which are more and more connected, right? So a very good example is Tesla cars, right? Tesla cars have a sensor which is integrated into the car, which can be used in insurance, right? Now, I do think that if you have the right connector to, let's say, the sensor from the Tesla car and the blockchain, you would be able to get the data you need to process an insurance claim directly on chain. And here you basically need the connectors, right? Because this insurance claim cannot happen if you don't know the data which is being put by the sensor, right? And again, Tesla is not going to work together a Chainlink like an Oracle framework. No one will do it, right? Because it takes a lot of time. Like it needs to be reliable. Like here we were talking about a few $100 million of value, a few billions actually. So you will need the right kind of structure to do this. But to answer your question, I see a world where anything, like I'm just giving the Tesla example, but anything we need will be connected. And you'll be able to optimize the way we do things. I see weather insurance, I see global trade, I see all of this stuff where basically you have sensors, you have inputs from all over the world, right? Like connected objects. And then if you get this data on chain, you can process claims, you can process insurance. I do think the possibilities here are limitless. I think we're already at a period which is redefining the way a lot of stuff works. And a lot of people do call, this period of crisis, but I think crisis always gives way to opportunity, right? And what we've seen more and more, this automation kind of trend will accelerate. And Tezos could be one of the blockchains or the blockchain, to really capture a lot of this value through IoT, through insurance claims, through global trade, like, all of these sectors, basically. I can give you, I won't give something, like only one specific thing, because I do think, I do really think it's like a huge kind of ocean of automation, of things that could go and that could benefit the Tezos ecosystem.
Man, I am so excited about Chainlink now. That last answer got me pumped up a bit. I'll probably spend this weekend trying to spin up a node or something and make my own price feed or something. Yeah, so to wrap up this podcast, I guess you kind of just mentioned, there's so many things that you can do, but where do you see Chainlink in the next 4 or 5 years? And what kind of things in the pipeline are you personally most pumped about?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm extremely enthusiastic about the blockchain space in general. As I said, I'm even more enthusiastic now that I'm seeing, how things are going in the traditional kind of world. I think blockchain is going to redefine insurance, finance, global trade. I think, blockchain is going to just disrupt everything just because objectively, and people who know this and who've been in the space enough, they know that what we propose to the world is much better than what currently exists. That it will probably foster a huge kind of, if everything goes well, at least it will be an era of growth and innovation, the likes of which we haven't seen before, at least we haven't seen in a long time, right? So I think we're in a kind of world which is stagnating quite a bit right now because the foundation is flawed. If you rebuild the foundation, you will be able to have a world which is innovating, which is growing. at a extremely fast rate, right? And I want this to happen, right? I think no one would pretend the contrary. Like, we all want innovation, we all want growth, we all want something that's better, like a better tomorrow than today, right? Like, a lot of people, when they get asked, will tomorrow be better than today? A lot of people don't know, right? I do think that blockchain will bring them the answer. I do think blockchain, through cutting third parties, through allowing a more efficient financial system, through allowing something which is, which is not bound by jurisdictions, which is not bound by frontiers, which is truly global, will create a better world for all of us, right? And if you want this to succeed, you need the bridges. You need a connector from everything that's real world to the blockchain, right? And here, because I'm extremely enthusiastic on the blockchain world, I'm extremely enthusiastic on Chainlink. I think the space, we need an Oracle solution. And I think Chainlink will be this Oracle solution to basically power everything that will happen in the blockchain space. And the blockchain space, as you understood, to me, is going to be the most of the words in a short, in a near future. I think, who said that? Like, you always underestimate what can happen in a year.
Right.
Well, you always overestimate what can happen in a year, but you always underestimate what can happen in 10 years, And I think in 10 years, we'll have completely different words than what's today. And I think, as I said, oracles will play a huge part there.
Yeah.
Now, if I was to say a bit more down to earth, what I'm extremely enthusiastic about right now, we're working on some really nice features, such as threshold signatures, which allow basically to aggregate data off-chain and feed data on-chain with kind of a security guarantee on how the data was aggregated, right? This will allow to circumvent some of the inefficiencies you have by aggregating data on-chain, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you send 21 answers on-chain, it's quite costly, right? On Tezos, on Ethereum, like, you can do things better. If you were to aggregate this data off-chain and send only one response on-chain, it's much more efficient, right? So that's threshold signature. We're working on staking, which is basically operators putting a collateral, a security deposit, and the security deposit would be slashed in case the data they provide is inaccurate, or in case they're down. So that's basically a huge kind of security guarantee for when we get to the few 10,
that's huge,
$20 billion, of value secured. I think it will be extremely important. Service agreements, which are basically SLAs and which go hand in hand with staking. I'm committing to provide this data every 5 minutes. If I don't provide this data, that's how much I lose, right? So that's a service agreement, and that's a commitment that's fully on-chain. We're working, of course, on having Chainlink on multiple chains. So Tezos, of course. So it's something extremely exciting to me. So we're working on all of these things, and many more in the pipeline. We are really creating something which is bound to become, the next, the communication protocol of what we call the blockchain space. And I'm extremely enthusiastic about everything going on and happening in the Chainlink ecosystem. Like, we're seeing more and more people join us. Like, it's becoming really not about the people building it, but also about the people using it, contributing, open source contributors, and that's something that's extremely, that's great for me. Like, the Tezos, for instance, integration is being worked on with SmartPy and Cryptonomics, right? It's not only Chainlink, and that really shows that we're going to a state where it's becoming a network effect, right? Because, like, a network effect can be very easily characterized by something where you work on a project all day and still you cannot keep up with the number of news and things happening. Well, that's what's happening with Chainlink. So, I'm extremely enthusiastic for all of this.
Yeah, I would definitely say personally, it's very hard to keep up with the news from Chainlink because, there's just so much of it. Johann, thanks for coming on the show. Brian, did you have any closing thoughts you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I said it before, I said it again. I'm super pumped. So I'm going to go dive in this weekend. But really, really, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys, for the great questions. Thank you for the awesome work you guys are doing. I really appreciated being there. Thank you.